What about cane toads in Australia?
And should I go ahead and mute everyone then? Mark, you think we're ready to mute everyone?
We are actually.
All right. All right, there we go. Mark? Mark, you should be able to unmute yourself. You're a co-host. There we go.
I am able. Welcome everybody to the 59th episode of Lit Balm, featuring a stellar array of readers and guests, including John Kinsella, Wang Ping, Tracy Ryan, Allison Adelle Hedge Coke, and last but not least, Gary Snyder. And this show is all in dedication to the National Black Bear Day. We're wishing all you black bears well. May you have plenty of food to eat, and may the moon shine on your life. And we're so grateful that Gary agreed to join us today. In fact, Wang Ping is over at Gary's house. She flew there a couple of days ago to make sure that all things would be set for the show. And we're very grateful to her, especially for helping make this happen. So as we normally do, we commence with a very short, shall we say, warming up of the mic by the three co-hosts. And first off the bat is my old friend, Jonathan Penton, who founded unlikelystories.org, an electronic journal of literature and art. Since then, he's lent editorial and management assistance to a number of literary and artistic ventures, such as Mad Hat, the New Orleans Poetry Festival, Rigorous, and Big Bridge. In 2005, he founded Unlikely Books, which publishes 3 to 5 books of poetry a year. He's organized literary performances and performed himself across the United States. His poetry books are Last Chap from Virgin Press, Blood and Salsa and Painting Rust, Prosthetic Gods from New Sins Press, Stanzas of Sidity from Litfest Press, and a free e-chapbook, which is available from Arctos eBooks, Backstories. Look forward to hearing your poem, Jonathan.
All right, well, as the regulars know, I'm not terribly prolific. So this week I'm going to read something that we recently published at unlikelystories.org rather than my own piece. This is called Don't Test Me Pro, and it's by Charles J. March III. Again, it's at unlikelystories.org, and I think it's funny, and if you don't, please clap. The outcry of the outre is an oeuvre that has gone on way too long. To diss my abstract object is abject expectation to the working class action lawsuit by the demonstrative remonstrance dances of evil red, white, and blue beasts that rule from luxury suites. Sweet, but we're not going to be complicit in our complaints against chemical restraints. If you disagree, Mr. T will take a strike 3 under a demurring Merle in the midst of a Black Panther Biden speech, purring street theater, mealy wrapped in a filigree condom of uprising tide, learning pod challenged children. But I suppose you'll oppose my inveighing investigation into Michael Vick via parvo-infected photobombing bloodhound anvils bought from Timothy McVeigh and sold to the grotesque Protestant provosts, culminating in a fulmination of funky feta cheese fuss from the violent Oval Office while signing peace to the Middle East. As Ahmadinejad blasts us in the globalized hope head. If life gives you lemons, squirt them in your third eye or go broke, being woke. All right, again, that's by Charles J. March Jr. So next up, I'd like to introduce our co-host, Cassandra Atherton. Cassandra is an award-winning writer, scholar of prose poetry, and professor of writing and literature in Melbourne, Australia. Her most recent books of prose poetry are Pre-Raphaelite, Leftovers, and Fugitive Letters. She is currently writing a book of prose poetry on the atomic bomb with funding from the Australia Council. I read it, it's wonderful. Cassandra co-wrote Prose Poetry and Introduction and the Anthology of Australian Prose Poetry. Haven't read them, assume they're wonderful too. She is commissioning editor for Westerly Magazine. Cassandra, will you read us a poem today?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Welcome everyone to Lit Balm, to my Lit Balm family. As I said before, I'm in Melbourne, Australia, so a big kind of g'day, I guess, from here. I'm going to read a poem called Relics of Hiroshima. It's got a couple of quotes from a transcript taken from a television show where they interviewed Paul Tibbets, who was the pilot of the Enola Gay. So it begins with a quote and there's a quote in the middle. Now, I'm sorry that these things had to happen, but they did. And I don't have any sympathy today because of it. I've never had a sleepless night. Applause. Hiroshima is burning. The bright bulb on the belly of the plane explodes over the city in red heat. I've heard the sound of the detonation secondhand, the low-pitched buzzing of slow bees in a hive. I've seen nuclear shadows etched on sidewalks, the shape of a woman with a walking stick bleached onto the stairs of the bank. From the plane, they see the landscape as a smudged charcoal drawing. They watch the city fall to ashes. By the side of the road, there's a woman and her baby, still attached by the umbilical cord. The plane is already heading home. If Dante had been with us on the plane, he would have been terrified. Time is like a calloid that keeps returning. Black rain stripes white walls in inky watercolor. We see twisted metal and debris, a stack of fused teacups, fragments of lives that persevere. The Habaksha sobs as he holds up his sister's school shirt. It trembles like a flag. Now I'd like to introduce the intrepid Mark Vincennes. If you haven't heard of him, then you must have been living under a rock for a very long time. Mark Vincennes is an Anglo-Swiss American poet, a fiction writer, a translator, editor, publisher, designer, multi-genre artist, and musician. He's published 15 books of poetry, including more recently, Becoming the Sound of Bees, Leaning into the Infinite, The Syndicate of Water and Light, and I love the title of this one, Here Comes the Night Dust. Vincennes' newest collection, The Little Book of Earthly Desires, and a novella set in ancient China, Three Taos of Tao, or How to Catch a Fortuitous Elephant, are both forthcoming in 2021 from Spite and Dival. An album of music, ambience, and verse, Left Hand Clapping, is also forthcoming from Tree Torn Records. Vincennes is also a prolific translator. He's translated from German, Romanian, and French. He's published 10 books of translations, most recently Unexpected Development by award-winning Swiss poet and novelist Klaus Merz with White Pine, which was a finalist for the 2016 Cliff Becker Book Prize in Translation. His translation of Klaus Merz's selected poems in Audible Blue is forthcoming from White Pine in 2021. Vincennes is editor and publisher of the stellar Mad Hat Press and publisher of New American Writing. He's lived all over the world. Join in if you are a regular, from Brazil to China to Iceland to India. He was born in Matilda Hospital on the Peak in Hong Kong, but he now lives on a farm in rural Massachusetts overlooking Herman Melville's Greylock Mountain, and where there are more black bears, flying squirrels, and striped skunks than people. Mark, please grace us with an amazing poem. Did we lose you? You're on mute again.
Yes, I'm a silly man. What can I say?
I just gave you a wrap up.
I bet you did. I missed the moment, I'm afraid. Anyway, this poem is called Wasps in a Bucket of Pine Sol, and it's from a collection I'm working on called There Might Be a Moon or a Dog, and it's for Gary Snyder. The heretofore must be discarded. Plan to live in the moment. Organize everything else in advance. Any secret books or chambers, use them. Any family heirlooms hanging around, treasure them. Memory is all in the eye. Yes, the secret too, but as my stepdaughter says, it's like a trumpet in your string quartet. Here they lie in abandon on their Fata Morgana in a red plastic bucket. Hallowed be their names. In the silence as it is in the night, all living forms return to their ever purest, are reinvented as particles that matter. To hold up a house, to sail a boat away, to clench the soil and squeeze, to forge the teeth, to catch a mouse. All those materials swirling in the blood, even the higher forms of fluorocarbons, nucleotides of nuclear this and that, and the radiation. Thank you. And now we move to our main feature of tonight. And I'm extremely delighted to welcome John Kinsella to read with Lit Balm. Are you there, John?
I'm here.
Nice to see you.
Thanks, Tracy.
John is an incredible poet and writer. His most recent volumes of poetry include Drowning in Wheat selected poems from Picador, 2016, Insomnia from Norton, Brimstone Villanelles from Arc. His volumes of stories include In the Shade of the Shady Tree, Cow's Breath from Transit Lounge, and Pushing Back. His recent novels include Lucidia Intervala from Dalkey Archive and Hollow Earth from Transit Lounge. His volumes of criticism include Activist Poetics, Anarchy in the Avon Valley from Liverpool University Press, and Post-Situativeness. His new memoir is Displaced, A Rural Life. He is a fellow of Churchill College, Cambridge University, and emeritus professor at Curtin University. But most relevantly, he's been an anarchist, vegan pacifist for over 35 years. He believes poetry is one of the most effective activist modes of expression and resistance we have. He often works in collaboration with other poets and writers, musicians and artists and activists. John wishes always to acknowledge the tradition and custodial owners of the lands he comes from and so often writes about, the Baladong Nugar people, the Wajuk Nungar people, and the Yamaji people. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Mark. It's nice to be with you all. I'm going to read about 8 poems, take just under 15 minutes. It's important to know as I look out the window here, and it's just becoming light here, as we were discussing earlier, this is actually my sleep hour. I'm going to be reading from a book called Insomnia. I tend not to sleep a lot during the night or at all. But as I look out, there's a fog coming through the valley. We're in the bush in the Western Australian wheat belt. And where we live, the place we call Jam Tree Gully, there's a kind of project of long-term restoration of damaged land, land that was damaged by colonial pastoralism. And so we tree plant, we welcome the animals in, and so on. So I'm going to begin with a poem called Kangaroos in the Fog, because literally as I look out, there are kangaroos in the fog. And you'll have to excuse me if I put my glasses on the tip of my nose and I read the distance, but I have all sorts of eye complexities of recent times. Kangaroos in the fog. There is no difficulty having a conversation with roos up on the stone of the hill. They will watch as intensely as being watched and define what they will and won't tolerate clearly. They are articulate in many languages. They leap across the screen of the window, co-signing the graph of the block, marking time between York gums. The green tint lifts between their leaps and day is limitless. You can see just far enough in this hillside fog if you know how to look. This strike of typewriter keys is a percussive warning, as all writing is, no matter the good intent, the plea to speak, the plea to be heard. I'm going to move across to a very different mode. That's we're on the verge of winter, though in fact the Noongar people who I acknowledge and whose land this is stolen land we're living on. It's a conversation to be here, one I am constantly involved with, and so is Tracy. This is very damaged country. Only 2 to 3% of the entire vegetation of the wheat belt is actually left, remnant vegetation. We're living in some of that vegetation here. We're surrounded by trees on the hillside. There's a reserve next to us. We have kangaroos, echidnas, possums, and so on. So, you know, this really is a refuge for our animals under great pressure from ecological degradation. Fire is a major issue here. There have always been fires, but fire, as we all know, through climate change is becoming more and more intense. The fires are burning hotter. Fire is part of the ecology of Australia. Certain seeds will only generate with fire, but so extreme are these fires, and many of them are mega fires, that they even burn the subsoil, so the seeds don't germinate, they're destroyed. So we're talking on a whole different level of fire, and every single year we live with this for about 6 months to 7 months, and it's getting longer every year. And this is a Villanelle of Fire. This is about literally, as we do many nights, I stay awake all night. I don't sleep very well, and thinking and listening and watching the windows for that light that comes with fire. And this is called Villanelle of Fire. On a hot night, lying on top of the sheets, watching lightning flashes without rain, fire could arrive so fast you'd be barely able to rise. These are the conditions of crisis. A crisis we make by increments, portions, on a hot night lying on top of the sheets. In declaring war on fire, governments distract from their growth and development refrains. Fire could arrive so fast, we'd be barely able to rise. Some people will have a chance to evacuate, others will be led to safety, and some will burn on a hot night lying on top of the sheets. Will these containment lines hold back the climate deniers? The fire in its cauldron, its search for lost oxygen? Fire could arrive so fast, we'd be barely able to rise. We are all in this together, watching smoke dead skies, hearing billions of animals dying cold undertones. On a hot night lying on top of the sheets, fire could arrive so fast, we'd be barely able to rise. I brought back from the Old Welsh or Ancient Welsh a verse form some years ago that had been much neglected called the Penillion. It's a stanza. It's a 4-based metrical stanza, but I've turned it into a 4-syllable stanza. And this is called Penillion of Cormorants in Polluted River. Wings out to dry. Those snake-necked birds perch on absurd protrusions, test pillar and post, eyeing below, plan and follow their beaks deep down past light, then crown metal surface. As shadow splits like mercury, as mercury, wings out to dry. Ailing fish skive, making each dive easier, then fruitless, those thin skins so rattled, their contents dead before being killed off, seeing their own dead ends as whose end God send, bright red speedboats would have us gloat. Wings out to dry, and nesting trees, dead colonies, so few are left here, blue eggs lost. Who feeds baited fish hooks to pied cormorants? Fish still in distress? They stare further than disaster, their bald raven revolution, wings out to dry. As you'd imagine, I spend a lot of my time as an activist trying to stop machinery destroying things. And the destruction begins with the smaller machines. And this poem's called Chainsaw. The seared flesh of wood, cut to a polish, deceives the rip and tear of the chain, its rapid cycling, a covering up of a raw savagery. It's not just machine. In the blur of its action, in its guttural roar, it hides the malice of organics. Cybernetic, empirical, absolutist, the separation of church and state, conspiracies against the environmental lobby, enforcement of fear are at the core of its modus operandi. The cut of soft wood is deceptive, hardwood dramatic. Just before dark on a chill evening, the sparks rain out dirty wood, hollowed by termites, the digested sand deposits, capillary highways imploded, the chainsaw effect. It is not subtle, it is not ambient, it is trans-nothing. A clogged air filter has it sucking up more juice, it gargles, floods, chokes into silence. Sawdust stresses boots, jeans, the field. Gradually, the paddock is cleared, the wood stacked in cords along the lounge room wall. A darkness kicks back and a cutout bar jerks into place. A distant chainsaw dissipates. Further on, some seconds later, another does the same. They follow the onset of darkness, a relay of severing, a ragged harmonic stretching back to its beginnings, gung-ho, blazon, overconfident, hubristic to the final cut, the last drop of fuel. And moving on to the book Insomnia, which is a kind of ecological map of sleeplessness, probably brought about by a deep anxiety regarding the destruction which we see on such a large scale here. This, though, is a somewhat celebratory poem called Buzz Pollination. We have at the top of Jam Tree Gully a flattened area that used to be a horse arena. When we took this place over as kind of custodians of trying to repair and restore, that was a very bare area, and it's been retreed and so on. And up along its edges, a colony of blue bees, which are rare native bees, have set up. They form little tunnels, very like a flute, along ridges, and it's very exciting. So we've had some real successes here in terms of restoration. Buzz pollination. Yes, that's a blue-banded bee making a burrow in the knuckle of yellow sand that's been there almost a decade, left over from house building set as rock. This native bee is a solitary, but building with an openness to other mothers-to-be as neighbours, birthing rooms and cribs, best addressed tenements, apartment block, communal yet separate, a socialist utopia. Quick in, quick out to carve comfort of security, and out and about, its feeding zone, one in which pockets of pollen are held back, kept in stock, selectively available to those who can unlock their puzzle boxes. Such vigorous, vibrant winging in proximity, such grip, such body action, intense and stimulating. This mutual aid of buzz pollination, so many voyeurs rave on about. At home now, nesting, digesting, laying. Okay, I've got 2 more poems to read. I'm going to read Hymn for Giant Creeper Snails and Their Shells, and then I'm going to finish with the Bulldozer poem. So this is the Campanile symbolicum, which is a sea snail that has a long cone-like shell that you find on Western Australian beaches. In the abstract, mollusks creep across the sandy seafloor in shell, dragging towers, owner builders, grazing to perish and become rock brickled in layers. Cross-section we marvel at in sediment anatomy eroded to reveal at Point Perrin, rough seas and mushroom rocks, while way out, deep sea divers pillage other species for their shells, plucked from in situ, registered, a sales gimmick built over life's nostalgia. As children, we pierce their marine wonder and later recollect it to boost profits spiraling out of control. Spine chilling. Thus, bell clapper, slow uvula's toll, not exactly going like the clappers, slides below a snorkeler's excited vision. Bells to chime in a wedding or funeral, bells struck for hollow victories. A collector's urge that's far from collectivist, a resonance plucked from the water. Narcissus divers, caught in rings in their own making, observe the turreted, the whirled, the chord of a concave spiral left at neap tide, gentle waves stroking its apex. A gambit of cladistics playing up to keel-hauled ecology of conquest, exploiting these living fossils, dead or alive, through a politics of exclusion, tangenting and making ad hoc, riding the coattails of keeping them in their places, self-preservation, these greedy exit strategies. To collect the relic, the chalk white abandonment, the green slime that illustrated its aquatic face to the elements, washed off as we churn in our childhood inquiries. For me, along Southern Shores reefs, for me, imagining giant creepers haunting all depths. And I'm going to finish with the Bulldozer poem, and it speaks for itself. This is a poem written for on-site protest and has been used extensively, literally in front of bulldozers. The Bulldozer poem. Bulldozers rend flesh. Bulldozers make devils of good people. Bulldozers are compelled to do as they are told. Bulldozers grimace when they tear the earth's skin. From earth they came. Bulldozers are made by people who also want new mobile phones to play games on and to feed families. Bulldozers are observers of phenomena. Decisions are taken out of their hands. They are full of perceptions. They will hear our pleas and struggle against their masters. Bulldozers slice and dice. Bulldozers tenderize. Bulldozers reshape the sandpit, making grrring noises, kids' motor skills. Bulldozers slice the snake in half so it chases its own tail, writing in front of its face. Bulldozers are vigorous percussionists, sounding the snap and boom of hollows caving in. Feathers in the cockatoos, a whisper in the roar. Bulldozers deny the existence of ether, though they know deep down in their pistons, deep in their levers, that all is spheres and heavens, and voices of ancestors worry at their peace. Bulldozers recognize final causes and embrace outcomes that put them out of work. There is always more scrub to delete, surely, surely, oh continuous tractor. O, S and U blades, each to his order, his skill set, communal as D9 dozers, whose buckets uplift to asteroids waiting to be quarried. Oh, bulldozer, your history. Oh, those halt tractors working the paddocks. Oh, the first slow tanks crushing the battlefield, the interconnectedness of being. Philosopher, oh, your makers, Cummings and Caterpillar. Oh, great cat, we grew up in their thrall, whether we knew it or not, playing sports where the woodlands grew, where you rode in after the great trees had been removed. You innovate and flatten. We must know your worldliness, working with companies to make a world of endless horizons. It's a team effort excoriating an ecosystem. Not even you can tackle an old growth tall tree alone. But we know your power, your pedigree, your sheer bloody mindedness. Sorry, forgive us, we should keep this civil, O dozer. In you as a cosmology, we have yelled the names of bandicoots and possums, of kangaroos and echidnas, of honey-eaters, and the day-sleeping tawny frogmouth you kill in its silence. And now we stand before you, supplicant and yet resistant, asking you to hear us over your war cry, over your work ethic being played for all it's worth. Hear us, hear me, don't laugh at our bathos, take us seriously, forgive our inarticulateness, our scrabbling for words as you crush us, the world as we know it, the hand that fed you, that made you. Listen not to those officials who have taken advantage of their position, who have turned their offices to hate the world and smile, kissing the tiny hands of babies you can barely hear as your engines roar with power. But you don't see the exquisite colour of the world, bulldozer. Green is your irritant. We understand, bulldozer, we do. It is fear that compels you, through eternity, ripping through eternity, embracing the inorganics of modernity. Thank you.
Thank you, John. What a reading. And I should add that Mad Hat Press will be publishing John's trilogy of rather unusual novels forthcoming. But next up, we have Allison Adelle Hedge Coke, whose honors include induction into the Texas Institute of Letters, the 2021 AWP George Garrett Award, the 2020 Dan and Maggie Unuya Distinguished Chair in Democratic Ideals at the University of Hawaii, also a distinguished writer at UHM in 2014, Fulbright Scholar in Montenegro, first Jade Female Poetry Festival, Sihua, China, inaugural prize, US Library of Congress, Whitner Binner Fellow, Lifetime Achievement Award, NWCA American Book Award, King Chavez Parks Award, and many more. She comes from working fields, from factories and horses and waters, and I understand even a little tobacco. Is that right, Allison?
A lot of tobacco. I was a sharecropper.
And Allison is a distinguished professor at the University of California, Riverside. She's the author of 8 books, including Burn, which can be purchased at Mad Hat Press, by the way, and Streaming, and editor of many, many more. Welcome, Allison.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a beautiful reading by John, and I want to start by opening up reading one that they pressed in Cordite. This is Joshua. It's from Look at This Blue, which is forthcoming next March with Coffee House. Joshua. Joshua trees of the first vandalized during shutdown, the national park defunding, 1,200 square miles at risk, and high desert. 45 might as well have burned it all. The rangy, succulent majesty said to straddle Mojave and Colorado deserts. incoming spray painting rocks, the smiley face, the 419, 3 underscores felling Joshua's to make off-roading roads so they could drive into sensitive areas where vehicles are banned. By 2100, climate change, rising temperatures may take it all. They're hurrying it along. People climb the massive junipers to break them, to break branches for prohibited fires. Its welcome shade, now gone. There is no plan B for our national parks, Rand Abbott. Donald Trump is literally destroying America, Bill Preddy tweeted. And a few lines more from Look at This Blue for the bear. Remember, along the way, the murdered sow bear, her cubs taken for claws. We're all just symptoms of something massive moving faster over. They're killing us, weaponizing nature, sanctifying arms, consecrating each trigger-flexed hand. And then some poems from Blood Run. Red-winged blackbird. Feet firmly perched, thin as stalks, reeds bulrush, until all at once they attend my female form. Streaked throat, brownness, 3 fly equidescent around me, flashing, each in turn calls territorial trills, beckons, Okali, Okali, spreads his wing, extends inner muscle, quivering red epaulet bands, uniquely bolden, turn away each suitor, and mime myself my audience, select another to consider, and he in turn quiver thrills, leave for insects, perhaps one male follows, maybe a brood of young line the summertime. Silver maples, samaras wing the wind, spread clusters along with mine, renewing prairie. As summer closes, I leave, with dragonflies, damselflies, butterflies, mosquitoes, moths, spiders, crickets for grain, seed, sunflower, join thousands to flock sky, grackles, blackbirds, cowbirds, starlings, swarming like distant smoke clouds, rising. Sunflower. Multitudes face sun, our rough broad extremities near touching, simultaneously attending to receive a warm embrace to welcome flower. Water swells behind my broad head. At nights, gently resting, preparing to greet new morn, to raise me full glory, to greet strengthening summit, daily heliotropism, motor cells, pulvinex, flex stem below my bud until the flower opens. My yellow shawl fringe exposes seed and welcomes bee, forever facing forward until my passing. Trade story from the south, Sphinx our venerated image, an Inca sun. My seed replenishes. Moon. My children were buried 'neath altitude, within masses of earth, as their sisters mourned them, with painted faces resembling my spirit full. They sang for them to enter into realms upon the light of Milky Way, upon the L's annexes of 1,000 fluttering crow. The white owl's heads wound round and back as spirit instructed the people how to circumvent further loss. It was this way, for time before the coming tide, before the stomping of milkweed, the dark throat shooting star, trampling of prairie chicken nest eggs, downy flocks, los cratering, plow, tiller, dozer, crane, before tampering, blackbirds grain to poison. I watch, peel slivers from this ball, and roll across my set domain. Remember all those who look to me for guidance, advice, their revelations. And dear. In the old where seekers came, we gave ourselves freely, each season rolling along, shared our soul over store, robe with every good heart uniting, with mindful through our own suffering. We watched them approach, robbed and robed ourselves, took to two legs to move among them freely unnoticed, sometimes advisory and sometimes exchanging. We give our tongue so they speak, in the language of our brethren, clan, know our insight, our dreams, as brothers, sisters. And now we dash, flee silently, leap tawny white from grass, bush, tree lines, upon arousal of thunderous echo banging. There's been no peace in this world since the dead were threatened. Landscape unjustly encountered, and there is no peace tonight. We must take cover and move. Beaver. When this dam goes, another will follow. No amount of rainfall deters me from what I'm born to do. That tree, that sculptured one, was only practice. I spooled the bottom in 3 days. Upon the fourth I took its limbs. All wood was meant mine, so long as I have reason. What reason has he, the man, to take ample and make scarce? The tree at Amnesia Mounds. My limbs outstretched once again, as in my human life, I stand before you naked and without shame here, without contempt or hate, without need for explanation nor compromise, here in this life, as the tree, free to stand upon the earth, holding memory from 1,000 years ago, of my people once flourishing on the same ground, once sustaining life, a wholly innocent cut quick whose greatest wish was to return without the frail flesh of common man. And here I stand before you. Here I stand. Burial mound. It's tenuous, releasing what belongs below. Memory thrives here. Sometimes in early spring, when white ash bud, fresh green waters fall from gentle above, they shift below, perhaps remembering days spent gathering saplings, black and golden, eagles, one crow, one swan, buffalo skin, shell disc, kettle, from oak cedar woodlands, bur oak savanna, floodplains, here on mixed grass, prickly peared flats, young would dash for fresh heart, and 20 tongues they gathered. I do my best to shelter them, keep them, sometimes perhaps remembering from my tilled base, barely protecting their gatherings, a finger, skeletal, reaches out to test the temperature. Ghost. With red-winged blackbird grace, we raise red grass as we pass over the field, hill, meadow. The swirl our motion wobbles leaves, causes scarlet bee blossom, pimpernel, tall grass to swing as if it runs. We swirl loose dust, white, red, fine powder lifts, sparks in afternoon sunlight. This familiar rustle has been known since time in this world began. Leave us some amaranth and goosefoot, lamb's quarters, not weed, and anise, re-tobacco, if you meander long, because some of us have skeletons nearby. Skeletons. Just yesterday, some of us returned home away from the archaeological scholar filings in university, home where we should have always lain, just yesterday before we were still alive, in the time past while life developed our framework, fully cultivated casing, while structure of our statures discerned, we were perceived as one, and now possess mere remnants of all we were, the soul's past, relative to all surround. We will stand the test, uphold each and every essential instrument of life as it exists, still relishing the essences and taste and hours of humankind, await the opportunity to sleep, to sleep, to sleep. And a little bit from Byrne. And thank you to Mark for publishing this book. It's illustrated by a really great Chickasaw artist, Dustin Mader, and out with Mad Hat. All roads travel inward until they end, and everything ends in time. Everything is temporary. An eternal fire holds itself only in heat. Fuel, oxygen, triangulate combustion, tetrahedral support planes existence, life spark. Yet fire has been carried, cultivated, cured since our first fire. It's log bundled, hollowed, and fed. He fed the first from his pickup on I-44. He tossed the news out his window, inflamed it all until half of Luther left Oklahoma in a fury so hot it was all white ash, the whole of it. Under skies dark with night, shining proof of other worlds, Orion was holding the east, the gleam of it maddening. Stars surely shine above, suns running sky each morning. Sirius still rounds night. It's set for 70 days or so. It always will. Stardust precedes the earth. The dust here picks up heavy, towered 70 feet high in Lubbock years back, and high in Arizona today, where Wallow breaks records like gangbusters, mainstreamers picking up haboob, as if their comprehension made it new. Predate dust. You can't. Dust has been, and rises whenever wind wills. Gusts are a given out here. Here where a heat plate scrapes grass like armadillo shell, tears into straw with friction, sparks it. The whole thing burns bright. It spreads for miles in short order, spreads for miles. People unable to move through it, leave everything they love, hope until return, then weep like the mother whose kids shared our school. One tied to a couch and burned alive after Demerol downed him there. A bad deal all over, bad deals. Char rounds out the horizon now. It used to be shadows, tall men in saddles, shifting through. Now shadow man unsaddled, blow away in wind on a giant flat. Arson, secrets untold shudder. What should be proper, what should be here, gone. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. What a reading. Next, we would be delighted to hear from Tracy Ryan, who's the author of 5 novels, most recently We Are Not Most People from Transit Lounge, and of 9 books of poetry, the latest of which is The Water Bearer from Fremantle Press. A new volume of poems, Rose Interior, is forthcoming, born in Western Australia, where she currently lives. She's also lived for a time in Britain, Ireland, and the USA. She's worked in libraries, book selling, community journalism, and teaching. She's currently on a literary grant to complete a historical novel set in the early French Renaissance. Her special interests are foreign language learning and translation. Welcome, Tracy.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Like John, whose office I'm sitting in, I'm also coming to you from Balladong Noongar land. So I'd like to pay my respects to Balladong Noongar elders and acknowledge all the contributions of Noongar culture to Australia and beyond. But I'm actually going to start with a short poem from this book, Scar Revision, most of which was written when we were living in the United States about 20 years ago. And I don't have any bear or black bear poems here, but this is a bird poem and really a poem about that strange dislocation when you arrive in a new place where all the creatures are different. Identikit. Red bird who shadows me, from housetop to kitchen. I have you now. You match the field guide, however static, too exactly to elude me for long. Hot flare in the bare uppermost twigs, or blur in the snowy window, fleeting as temper. I didn't expect you here. You are like anything out of keeping. I would fit in. Draw walls around me like the curtains missing from every pane. Instead, I should name you loud and clear, twin to my own red interior. Be in here as you are out there. And the next poem, which is from the same book, is actually an Australian poem. Just before the reading, people were chatting about introduced species, and in Australia, the fox was introduced in the mid-19th century so that the colonial people could have their recreational hunting, and of course caused a lot of havoc for the environment as well as for the foxes themselves. And so this poem is about a fox sighting. Foxes around here, of course, being considered a pest. It means if you see one, if it's out in the open, it probably won't be around long. Junction. Oh, I should add the speaking voice in the poem is sitting in a car driving. Junction. Fox, you are overwritten. Freeze frame vision, too like a poem. I break, and the children clamour, noses to glass, chill mirror. Languid, askance, at leisure, slow motion that spells disaster. So unlike your usual flare and streak, I have to check for tail to reckon you. Reckless, a matter of time. Your beauty is nonetheless. Your eyes fix mine as if to guess at destination. What brings us to this pass? On our way to the nameless, brazen as day, no truce, no cover, marked man, you appraise and release us. And from a fox to a lamb. This is from a book called The Argument, which is really a series of poems that are like a kind of argument between life and death. So the lamb is on one side of that. And the lamb had an unusual backstory. And the 3-year-old in the poem is our son, who's now an adult. So this was written some time ago. And it's really partly the poem is quite fixated on the strange movement that I'm sure everyone's seen that little lambs have, the way they kind of do this weird gambling leap. Lamb seems to leap at some unseen will, surprising herself, ad libitum, a sneeze, a seizure in motion, a tick, ecstatic, mini-mystic, pure impulse, hauled up and dropped by magic, now limp as a hanky, now all spring and muscle. 3 weeks and the ground, great fontanelle, still hasn't set under her feet, too sweet to call cloven, they are doll's feet, tottering, abridged. Sniffing us out by the toes, how we do this upright and hard thing. She's nibbling grass, leaf and plastic, everything grist to a new soul mill. Runs rings around small boy on trampoline, 3 years, who notes twin marks on her neck, where the eagle grabbed and lost her to life. On her head, twin buds that will one day be all the horns she has. And from the same book, another bird poem. This is about the tawny frogmouth, so called because it has a froggish shaped beak, I suppose. It's also often very camouflaged on the trees that it sits in, and comes out in the evening, nocturnal. Frogmouth. It tears my eyes from the road, already winter darkened at 6:30, midway to collecting my child from a friend's house, and I slow, as if cautioned, as if the gaze solders to itself an instant, inanimate on its low branch perch as roadside reflectors, or one of those luminous bugaboos on a sideshow alley ghost train. Little frights that inoculate because finite, because artifice, and then swing back to let us pass. But the bird has nothing to do with this. It is an accident of transit, of season, that I even see it. Nocturnal in habits as I am domestic, am daylit. Only this hinge of evening allows us contact, recurrent yet asymptotic, and always metaphoric, though which is tenor and which vehicle I wouldn't like to bet, its very name invoking what it is not, but resembles, as this moment recalls another moment. My mother at 10, shinning up schoolyard trees to escape a bully, then face to face with what she thought merely part of the trunk, suddenly disengaging, cryptic plumage freed from its context, unloosing another order. Okay, this book is called The Water Bearer. It's a more recent book, and I'm just going to read 2 short poems from this book. Again, one of them is about the unfamiliarity. It's written in Germany in a deciduous forest, and here in Australia, most of the native forests anyway are not deciduous. We have obviously deciduous trees that have been introduced. So walking in deciduous forests in Germany in winter, it means that you can't necessarily, or at least I can't necessarily identify trees because they don't have leaves. So it's a whole different way of looking at things. So it's called Laubwald, being the German word for deciduous forest. The yew keeps its green and the distant pine. All else is skeletal. We move through a huddle of uprights, unidentifiable unless by branch or bark, but not being locally that literate. Instead, we look to ground level, layer on layer of dried discards that precede our time here, and noting crimped contour, say, oak, though no trunk quite has that look, but the leaf is proof, even cast off, there's continuity in being. Compacting archive, we'd grind to nothing if not for the mud we want to avoid. So we stick strictly to pathways, don't digress, despite soft invitation, keeping unmarked, not wanting to shed the way this wood has shed, refusing to own the ache, the creak, the chill in limb and bone. We pass without seeming to pass, aware our bareness too has dignity. With this difference, the trees, if let be, will come good again, green again, while we will be elsewhere, far, and not return. This one's from a very different place. It is more about the idea of return, in fact. It's a poem from Reunion Island about a little plant that they're called sensitive or sensitive. I don't know if you've seen them, but they're little little leaves that recoil when touched and open again when you leave them be. Sensitive. Everything shut will open again. The intimate green we don't notice till you show us in this childhood place how each leaf responds to the least reading of fingertips, folding down, as if we only briefly crossed its mind and were then forgotten in its restoration. Mimosa pudica, essence of discretion, fragility of interface. Our touch passes like cliff shadow, leaving no trace. Everything is a game, you say, as the boy keeps leaping, will leap forever into the spray beside the steep cascade. Imprint also effaced as he runs back into daylight, evaporation. What am I saying? 30 years? It's 40 or 50 already. The ground full of holes that are never sated. The road an eternal ford with no sign of the other side. Everything shut will open. Okay, and in the last 5 minutes, I'm going to read a poem from a book called Hoard, which is written in Ireland and is both about the hoards found in bogs and about bogs. Ireland's boglands, of course, being very familiar to people from Heaney's poems, among others. And it's not the only country, of course, with a lot of bogland, but it is so striking there that there's almost nothing else you can see, at least in the part of Ireland where we lived. So this poem is called Nuptial Bog. I'm building my roof of turf, my peaty sheath, a coveted blanket, roll me up in it, and I go out like a light, like the wisp rising at night that country people swear they see and steer clear of. I am weaving a mat to lay me out on, glory box wadded with dank linen, golden goblets fit for such rich wedding, self-preservation, muffling hunger moss by moss, glutting the mouth, avid and massive, a carbon sink, flotation tank where feeling falls away, each word a sod steeped in acid, each bud a sundew, one of my myriad eyelids fluttering upward, set to keep watch above, to guard dowry and hoard, wet retinue, trousseau, I swallow and build. And the last poem I'm going to read is actually from a book that's forthcoming. So I've got it as a sheet of paper here. It's also from Ireland, and it's written down the page in two sides because it's about hedges, which are very undervalued habitats. Not many trees left in Ireland, as people probably realise. Hedges. unnatural remnant becomes so crucial, as if all life were banked at the edges, refuge to numberless creatures, not all visible, which may be why people don't esteem them. Barriers to view when the eye desires to be all roaming. Cutters hoe through and lay waste to them. Naked ends of limbs, once sinuous, purposeful, throwing up hands at us. Legacy, yes, of earlier damage, but why do more of it? Here too, the tussle of those who protect and others who say only poor visibility on already narrow roads. For some humans, anything upright is competition. This is no historic memory of resentment, oppression, enclosure. Barely a thought remains for what was there before hedgerows. A grudge at any hindrance to self-expansion, assumption the world is in the way. Why not, with delicacy, the care you'd show your own home? It is your own home. You'll only see them right on foot. That hurtle, that hot, overwhelming forward engine is a large part of the problem. Photograph them and it may seem all ground without figure. But look closer, mille fleurs, the image teeming. Learn to read them, rebarbative, and perhaps that adds to the hatred some dredge up to slash them, ancient tales of barrier and hurdle, enemy, impediment, and it's true they're meant to inhibit large movement. They harbour and cover the small, the going about of own business, shelter some resent as buffer on freedom, nests only tenuous to humans, well shielded from their own viewpoint, which we seem incapable of taking on for even a moment. Thanks, people.
Thank you, Tracy. Fantastic. And next, we're going to hear from Wang Ping. Ping was born in China and came to the US in 1985. Her publications of poetry and prose include American Visa, Foreign Devil, Of Flesh and Spirit, New Generation Poetry from China Today, Aching for Beauty, Foot Binding in China, The Magic Whip, The Dragon Emperor, The Last Communist Virgin, Flashcards, poems by Yu Jian, 10,000 Waves, and Life of Miracles along the Yangtze and Mississippi, which won the AWP 2017 award for nonfiction. She also won the Eugene Caden Award for Best Book in Humanities and is the recipient of an NEA, the Bush Artist Fellowship for Poetry, the McKnight Fellowship, and many others. She received her Distinct Immigrant Award in 2014 and Venezuela International Poet of Honor in 2015. She is the Minnesota Poet Laureate from 2021 to 2023, appointed by International Beat Poetry Foundation. She's also a photographer, installation artist, and flamenco dancer. Her multimedia exhibitions include Behind the Gate, After the Flood of the Three Gorges, Kinship of Rivers, at schools, colleges, galleries, museums, locks and dams, and confluences along the Mississippi River. She is a professor emerita of English at Macalester College in Minneapolis and founder and director of Kinship of the Rivers Project. Welcome, Ping.
Hi, thank you, everyone. Before I start reading, I'd like to just to show you Gary's house. I've been staying here for a few days, Nevada City on the Sierra Mountain foothill, and it's a very historical place. And Gary's homestead is called Kit Dizzy, and it's a plant which is actually wild roses from China. And I wrote, it's really beautiful here, and you probably can see this, can you see the ceiling? I don't know. So, and I want to show you the, oh yeah, this is the ceiling, right? And I want to show you the bear otter, and the bear is almost Gary's, how should I say, totem. And he has published many poems, and I translated quite a few, and we're going to, we recorded some poems yesterday because he's 91 years old, and also he has to save his energy for this big international Lifetime Achievement Award from China, and right after this. So I hope everyone could, Mark is going to host this ceremony, and Mark, you're going to send a link to everyone, right?
Yes, I'll put the link to the Gary's award in the chat in a second.
Right, and so I'm going to walk through this house, and I will lead you to Gary and say hi, and he would like to say hi to everyone, and before I start reading, okay?
Sure.
Yeah. Hey, Gary. Here's everyone. Oh, you're in the closet? Okay. Here's Gary. Hi, this is Mark Vincennes.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Gary. How are you?
He's getting
I
ready
know,
for the ceremony.
probably Ping caught you off guard, right?
What did he say?
Did Ping catch you off guard?
Oh, Ping always catches me off guard. She's wonderful.
I'm
Yes,
the trickster, right?
Yeah, she's the first real trickster female coyote I've ever met.
Yeah.
She won't
So
admit to
now I
that.
understand what you meant when you said that you were out there. And
Yeah.
But
So
she won't admit to that. You know that, Gary.
what?
She won't admit to being the first female coyote you've ever met.
Well, she managed to do it.
Well, but anyway, today is Gary's big day, and so here we have a lot of poets here from Australia. So Mark, could you quickly introduce?
Oh, sure.
A few people here.
So tonight we had a fabulous reading from John Kinsella, who is in my opinion one of the best Australian poets that lives, and his wife Tracy Ryan, who's also a fantastic poet, Allison Adelle Hedge Coke, and now we're about to hear from Wang Ping and Gary Snyder.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Great.
Okay.
So I'm going to do my reading, and I will let you to change. He's going to change into red tie.
Sounds good.
A red shirt, a white shirt and red tie.
And a red tie. Well, I mean, Trump wore a red tie. Trump, the ex-president, used to wear a red tie, so I guess I can.
Don't forget he always wore it down to his knees.
Oh no, we don't want that. Gary may trip. Okay.
Okay.
Well,
Nice to meet
thank
you.
you, Gary.
Thank you so much, Gary.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to start reading. Just give me 2 seconds. I'll go back to the table. I'll sit down. And
Such a beautiful
So-
ceiling there.
huh?
The ceiling is so beautiful.
I know. Did you see the ceiling?
Yeah, it's fantastic. Love that.
How do you see that? I
Are there a lot of birds running around there, or bats or anything?
Yeah. Well, also lots of trillions of ants running furiously across kitchen floor and the walls, and lots of mosquitoes and lots of spiders.
Well, you told me
here
you
too,
told me
right?
tomorrow you're gonna cook dumplings for Gary and his sons, right? So maybe
Yes.
throw in a couple of those ants. They might add a little spice.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know. But anyway, I'm going to read, and I'll just read the one poem about elephant. And then, we did record quite a few poems for everyone, and they are really good. I'm very pleased. Okay. So thank you again for having me here. And it's a pleasure to meet everyone. And old friends like Allison. I'm going to read Elephant. I went to Africa 2019 and traveled from Botswana through Zimbabwe, through Zambia, to Tanzania, just followed the rivers and did poetry and Kingship River prayer flags along the way. And And I just really felt the first animal I saw in Africa is elephants, and they're just such magnificent, symbols and creatures, so noble. So I came back and I wrote this poem, and it's called Skin Deep. Do you know the elephant skin cracks like dried earth? Do you know how much water its troughs and ridges hold, running like rivers through the delta? Do you know it's their largest and most sensitive organ for bonding? Do you know its beauty, skin deep, aging with grace? Do you know how they love their grandma? The older, the better. How her memory keeps the map of the land, water holes, food, graveyard. Do you know it's, hold on, somehow I lost my,
Sorry, Ping, I didn't realize you were reading off the screen.
yeah, I am, okay. Do you know, oh shoot. Do you know how they love their grandma, the older the better? How her memory keeps the map of the land, water holes, food, graveyard. Do you know its neurons 10 times more than human brain? Its hippocampus large enough to hold all the memory, love, pain, sorrow. Do you know their silent calls, traveling 10 kilometers underground? Their infrasound inaudible to our ears. But if we listen, we see their forehead vibrating with love. Do you know they are the keystone of Africa, skin of the earth? Do you know how to love them? Our king, our grandma. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Ping.
Yeah, and
Thank you so much for going to see Gary and and the video that we're about to see of the reading that you guys did earlier today or yesterday.
I did it yesterday, and it
Right.
took like more than 24 hours actually to download onto YouTube. I was getting nervous. Maybe it's too long or something. Oh, by the way, my latest book is My Name is Immigrant, and it came out during the pandemic, so I couldn't really do the book tour. But it was nominated for National Book Award, Pulitzer, Penn Literary Award, and the Griffin International Poetry Award. And so I think it's one my best poetry book. So
I think it is. I think it is, Ping.
Thank
think it
you.
is.
Yeah, and yeah. So let's
Now
play.
we're going to hear from Gary. Just briefly. I mean, everyone. I think everyone knows who Gary is, but for those of you who might not be so clear, Gary Snyder is an American man of letters. He's perhaps best known as a poet, but he's also an essayist, lecturer, environmental activist with onco-primitivist leanings. He has been described as the poet laureate of deep ecology. Gary began his career in the 1950s as a noted member of the Beat generation, but is also identified as the poet of the San Francisco Renaissance, along with Jack Spicer, Robert Duncan, and Roman Blazer. Gary's work blends physical reality and precise observations of nature with inner insight, received primarily through the practice of Zen Buddhism. His work reflects a concern for the environment, the plight of the American Indian, as well as insights engendered by his role as a husband, father, and steward of the land. Gary has won numerous honors and awards for his writing, including the Pulitzer Prize, an American Book Award, the Bollinger Prize, an American Academy of Arts and Letters Award, a Guggenheim Foundation Fellowship, the Bess Hoskin Prize, the Levinson Prize from Poetry, Robert Kirsch Lifetime Achievement Award from the Los Angeles Times, the Shelley Memorial Award, and the Ruth Liddy Award. Gary was elected a Chancellor of the Academy of American Poets in 2003. So we'd be delighted to see what he and Ping recorded for us.
Yeah, thank you. Can I add also, because
Sure.
like deep in his house, in his belly, basically, right? And so his property is just really amazing. It's like a museum, living museum. And I got to visit his library, and I found this incredible books he has studied, right? From Chinese literature, poetry, religion, from Chinese, Japan. And the stories he told me, that he just told me he spent a year on the sea sailing as a sailor, you know, before he came back. Just really amazing scholar, poet, practitioner. And I tried, and he's going to teach me how to throw hatchet and maybe archery if I'm good. So
Well,
I'm really
is he going to teach you the Mongolian hand grip?
No, he only learned a few times, but he doesn't, he can't teach me Mongolia. Amazing, you know that. He will be really impressed in the Mongolia release, you know.
Absolutely.
The archery, right? You're talking about archery.
Correct, correct.
Yeah, great.
Are we,
Yeah.
are we ready,
Thank you.
Jonathan?
So let's, yeah.
Sure are, yeah. Let's see here. Share sound, optimize for video clip, mute myself.
We are at Gary Snyder's studio. This is Gary, and we're going to read 3 poems by Gary, 2 for the bear and 1 for deer. He will read the English and I will read the Chinese translation. Thank you, Gary.
Good morning. So first, a poem called Arctos, which is Greek for bear. Quoting Pythagoras, she-bears are the hands of Rhea, the earth goddess. Sighing, bursting, steam, sulfur, lava, rolling and bubbling up, falls out, back in on itself, curling and licking, getting hard. Lichens, oak groves, float up like cloud shadows, soft, soft, loving plant hands. Tendrils slip till they meet, it pulls taut. Green and quick sap calls swell the hills. Changing cloud mountain, changing cloud gate, rainbow glimmering with swallows, looping cranes. Ice field and snowfields ring as she comes, gliding down the rainbow bridge. Joy of the mountains, the great she-bear.
熊阿克托斯帕萨格拉斯，母熊是女神绿雅的左右手。叹气冲破火山，吐着硫磺蒸汽，翻滚喷发，下降，落回原地，曲卷田底，坚硬，呆选像树林，如云影上下沉浮，柔软，柔软，草木手里的母爱。须卷悄悄地伸出，碰撞拉紧，绿色与草香的呼喊胀满山坡。变了云山，变了云门。彩虹闪烁，燕子白鹤来回穿梭。它来了，从彩虹桥下滑下。冰天雪地，一片铃声。大地的欢喜神，伟大的母熊。
This poem is for Bear. As for me, I am a child of the god of the mountains, says the bear. A bear down under the cliff. She is eating huckleberries. They are ripe now. Soon it will snow, and she, or maybe he, will crawl into a hole and sleep. You can see huckleberries in bear shit if you look this time of year. If I sneak up on the bear, it will grunt and run. The others had all gone down from the blackberry brambles, but one girl spilled her basket and was picking up her berries in the dark. A tall man stood in the shadow, took her arm, led her to his home. He was a bear. In a home under the mountain, she gave birth to slick, dark children with sharp teeth and lived in the hollow mountain many years. Snare a bear, call him out. Honey eater, forest apple, Lightfoot, old man in the fur coat. Bear, come out. Die of your own choice. Grandfather, black food. This girl married a bear who rules in the mountains. Bear, bear, you have eaten many berries. You have caught many fish. You have frightened many people. 12 species north of Mexico, sucking their paws in the long winters, tearing the high-strung caches down, whining, crying, jacking off. Odysseus was a bear. Bear cubs gnawing the soft tits, teeth gritted, eyes screwed tight, but she let them. Till her brothers found the place, chased her husband up the gorge, cornered him in the rocks. The song of the snared bear. Give me my belt. I am near death. I came from the mountain caves at the headwaters. The small streams there are all dried up. I think I'll go hunt bears. Hunt bears? Why shit, Snyder. You couldn't hit a bear in the ass with a handful of rice.
献给熊的歌。我呢，我就是山神的孩子。山羊下有头黑熊，在吃北国的红豆。果子都熟透了，第一场雪就要降临。母熊也许是公熊，将爬入地洞冬眠。在这个季节，假如你仔细查看，你可以在熊缝里找到红豆。假如你悄悄地走进黑熊的背后，它会哼哼一声，然后逃跑。所有寂静里的摘果子的人都已经下山了，只留下一个女孩。她打翻了篮子，冒着黑夜捡拾红豆。黑影中，一个高大的男子拉起她的胳膊，把她带回家。男子是头熊，家住在山脚下。他为熊生了一堆英俊健齿的黑孩子，他们常年住在空旷的山里。套熊的方式，把他喊出来，喂，吃蜜的，森林的苹果，轻手轻脚，穿皮袄的老人，熊啊，出来吧，
以你自选的方式死亡。那个女孩嫁给了熊，嫁给山中的大王。熊，你已经吃饱了果子，你已经抓了许多鱼，你已经吓跑很多人。墨西哥的北边有12种熊，漫长的冬夜，舔着熊掌度日，哭着喊着自慰着，把隐藏的食物撕碎。奥迪修斯就是个熊，熊娃娃咬妈妈的奶头，他咬紧牙关，皱紧眉头，任凭娃娃吸容，直到他的兄弟找到山里，把他的熊丈夫赶进山谷，把他的熊丈夫困在岩间。被捕的熊唱着：把我的皮蛋还给我，我快死了，我来自上游的山洞，那儿的小溪都已干涸。我也想去抓头熊。你要抓熊？别拿我开玩笑好不好，斯乃德？我就是给你一把米，你也砸不中熊的屁股。
Oh, that's lovely. So the last poem here I'm going to read is called Long Hair. And I had very long hair for several years myself, down to my waist and back, at a time when a lot of my friends had long hair.
Like mine. I still have long hair.
She still has long hair, but, you know, she has an excuse. She's a girl.
Oh, same difference.
Yeah, I know. Long hair. Hunting season. Once every year, the deer catch human beings. They do various things which irresistibly draw men near them. Each one selects a certain man. The deer shoots the man, who is then compelled to skin it and carry its meat home and eat it. Then the deer is inside the man. He waits and hides in there, but the man doesn't know it. When enough deer have occupied enough men, they will strike all at once. The men who don't have deer in them will also be taken by surprise, and everything will change some. This is called takeover from inside. Deer trails. Deer trails run on the side hills, cross-country access roads, dirt ruts to bone-white board houses, ranches tumbled down. Waist-high through manzanita, through sticky, prickly, crackling, gold-dry summer grass. Deer trails lead to water, lead sideways all ways, narrowing down to one best path and split and fade away into nowhere. Deer trails slide under freeways, slip into cities, swing back and forth in crops and orchards, run up the sides of schools. Deer spoor and crisscross dusty tracks are in the house and coming out the walls. And deer bound through my hair.
Beautiful. I love this poem so much. 长发，打猎的季节，一年一次，鹿捉人。他们用各种方法把人引诱到身边。每头鹿都选好一个对象，鹿射人，人被迫为鹿剥皮，把鹿肉扛到家里。人吃肉，于是鹿就进入人的身体，它在里面等待，而人却不知道。当足够的鹿占领足够的人，他们就一起出击，连没吃过鹿肉的人也被捕获。 于是，一切都改变了。这就叫从内部占领。路径，路径沿山坡环绕，穿过山村土路，车辙如白骨，平板房滚下山坡，穿越高达腰身的熊果木，穿越粘稠杂手噼啪乱响金黄干燥的夏草。路径带我们来到水源，小路、近路、斜路、正路汇集成一条最好的路，然后分开，渐渐地隐去。路径悄悄地穿过高速公路，滑进城市，来回穿梭农田果园，然后跑到学校周围。路的脚印纵横交错，沾满泥土的足迹渗入屋里，跳过墙头。路穿越我的头发。Okay, Gary, thank you so much. Could you say a little bit about this long hair? That just fascinated me so much to no end, right? And so usually people say humans capture deer and deer
Capture men.
right, but in this poem you reversed it, right? And I think it totally makes sense.
Well, it's psychological. It's the spiritual and psychological realm of interacting deeply with the wild,
Yeah,
of which we are still part,
yeah,
and which is still all around us. We act it out without even knowing it. The complexity of these relationships, of course, we act it out when we have attitudes and practices with wild bears or wild deer that come near our houses or creep into the house. Even like bears have come into my house looking for food. And I don't mind. I just don't want them to make too much of a mess.
right.
But there's a world out there that Native American people and other pre-agricultural people learned to live with and to enjoy, really, and also have opinions about for centuries and centuries and centuries. And we still can teach ourselves and learn from that, learn how not to just be afraid of or dismiss and dislike the wild world, but realize that it is a world that we live in too, and we have to share some of it.
Yeah,
Just as you might as well admit to yourself you're going to be eaten up by something.
that's true.
Yeah.
By more likely by microbes, bacteria.
Well, they're real too.
Yeah, and fungals. Then feed my
But
body to
that's
the tree.
after they've gone through your skin and your bones.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And but this is also kind of quite Hegelian, like the master slave, right? We humans think we're the master of nature. We conquer the world. But in reality, it is like a deer, the bear, the trees, the rivers. We are there, like they have the true power, not us.
Well, so we know that from big rivers and hurricanes
Right.
and big winds.
Right,
Anyway,
right.
and we might know it once in a while from animals too.
Yes,
And we still will in the future.
we will.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
And in the meantime, there are some things that are wonderful to enjoy. The great flights of the migratory cranes
Yes.
that come down from the north in the fall and go back to the north in the spring.
They are much older than human beings.
Well, of course.
Yeah, they're very, very old.
They're
Yeah.
very, very old. And
Yeah.
human beings are pretty old too.
Yeah,
Yeah, except we looked more different
I know.
earlier.
Yeah, yeah,
And we're still around. Our models are still around.
yeah.
It would be fun to see what would happen
It will be.
if we're still around at all.
Yes.
And it's just to live that life in your inner life is a worthy choice.
Right.
At least it's an artist's choice.
Right. When we were born, like we almost like already given everything we need inside us.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
And we often like don't know about it and just chasing after other things. Like, but it's all in us already, right?
Well, it's close.
Yeah.
We still need our mothers and fathers for a while.
Right.
They help us choose what to eat.
Yes. Yeah. And so I'm looking forward to learn the archery from you.
Archery.
Yeah. The bows and arrows.
That's a very sophisticated development.
I know, but I still want to try.
Well, first you have to try with a spear.
Okay.
And get a sense of what can be done with a spear.
Yeah.
Then there's also the boomerang.
Okay.
Which goes out and comes back.
Right.
And human beings have been using all those things for a long time.
Yeah. It's
but the bow is a wonderful invention. And it's not very old. Mm-hmm. They've only had bows for about 7,000 or 8,000 years.
Yeah. Do you know who invented that?
No, we don't know who invented it.
Mm-hmm. I know China has a long history of bows.
Well, so does Native America.
Yep.
Yeah, but it would be interesting to know more about it. And of course,
in Mongolia, I saw that your picture of Mongolia archer in your library.
That was very sophisticated.
That's beautiful.
It's beautiful, yeah. And at what point, we don't know at what point archery, the bow, and also the arrow became better and better and more sophisticated and also more precious.
Yes.
A good bow and a set of arrows in 18th century China was very expensive.
Is it?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, not anybody could afford it.
I didn't know that.
Well, you have to look at what they were using when they stood as guardians on the porches of the imperial palace.
Right. Yeah.
The bodyguards.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
So do you know about the Chinese release? Or it's also called the Mongol Release?
No, what is that?
There's two ways that when you pull the string back, there's two ways of releasing it.
Okay.
The Chinese and Mongol way is one.
Okay.
The other one is called the Mediterranean release.
Okay.
That's what I learned.
Okay. Do you know the Chinese Mongolian way?
It's very hard to do, but I've done it.
You've tried it?
Yeah. Well, if you take archery courses in Japan, you use old style bows and you use the Mongolian release.
Okay.
That's what the teacher makes you do.
That's the more difficult way?
Yes.
Okay. But so you know how to do it?
I know how to do it, but it's not easy.
Okay. I would love to try it.
Well, so you could take Japanese archery lessons.
From you?
No, I couldn't do it. But they have some schools in California and probably in other parts of the country.
I'm sure it's everywhere. Yeah, I'm sure. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. That was Gary and Ping. Ping, are you still around? Oh dear. All right. Anyway, an amazing experience. I thought also Ping's tour through Gary's house was kind of amazing. But thank you all for being here for this amazing feature. On National Black Bear Day in the United States, with John Kinsella, Tracy Ryan, Allison Adelle Hedge Coke, Wang Ping, and Gary Snyder. Thank you for joining us, and we're gonna move on to a few other things, just briefly next time, which will be on July 19. we have a reading with Molly Gaudry, Dan K. Martin, Helen Ivory from the UK, and Fred Marchant from Boston. So please join us for that. And many more interesting things coming up. There's the Surrealist Poetry Extravaganza, which will be a full weekend long from July to August. We'll let you know about that shortly. We're expecting to do a fantastic reading with the launch of the new issue of New American Writing very shortly as well. I believe it's June 26th, yeah. So please join us for those. But first and foremost, thank you, Gary. Thank you, Wang Ping, for also going together and being with Gary and showing us around his wonderful home. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, John, and thank you, Tracy. It's been wonderful. And now we move on to the open mic section of the reading, which I believe I'm handing off to Jonathan. Is that right?
That's my recollection. All right, we've got 4 readers for the open mic, all excellent poets, and I think you're going to want to hear from them. First up, we have Bill Lavender, who I believe is here under a professional name, the NOPF Board, New Orleans Poetry Festival. Bill, is that you?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can.
Well, it's great. It's an honor to be reading in this crowd today. Pardon me while I pull this poem up. So I wanted to write something that was sort of on topic. It's not really, but I've written a couple of poems about cicadas. As you may or may not know, right now is kind of is the hatching time for this brood this year. So back in 1996, when I first hooked up with my now wife, Nancy, brood 2, I believe it was just hatching after 17 years in the ground. And I wrote a poem about that and about her. And so this year, brood 10, 2021, I wrote this thing. So as it was Nancy's birthday and at the same time a big cicada season, I thought of that poem I wrote 25 years ago when the majestic brood 2 was coming out, which took some doing to unearth. And then when I found it in a dusty corner of the hard drive, it opened first as gobbledygook, having been originally coded in some now forgotten software, which made me think how short-lived all this stuff is, that language these days only lives with constant push. In the new digital world where there's room for everything, we no longer have the luxury of longevity, or if something lasts, it is forgotten, that has and then reemerges transformed after long dormancy. The memory of the occasion is coming back to me now. Nance and I had only just hooked up and we weren't living together. I had been invited to read at the Insomniac-a-thon, a crazy event that ran from 10 a.m. on a Friday morning continuously through Sunday about noon in August of '96. And it was one of those things where I didn't worry about it until the last minute, but woke up like Thursday in a panic that I didn't have anything to read, and so wrote that poem very quickly. I showed it to Nance the next day and she was like, that's how it happened, so what? Funny how the fact that it was basically factual blinded her to the wordplay that when I read it now seems the most prominent feature, especially the synesthesia, which is what I was thinking about this morning at 3:30 when I woke up and lying there in half sleep thinking about the poem and about cicadas in general. I had this vision of catching one of their songs in my hand and then sort of balling it up and putting it in a bag, thinking that later I could take it out and throw at someone. Like if I were mad at them or needed to get revenge for something, they or anyone had done to me. You know, the way some people take up martial arts or buy a pistol thinking, okay, asshole, I dare you to fuck with me now. That's what was me with my balled up cicada songs. Dreams come true, I found. Like back then, Nance had this dream that I had gone completely Greek and changed my name to Lavendopoulos. And I really did get into the Greeks after Nance had that dream. I didn't change my name, but I did write this thing called La Police, in which I researched the history of the polis, and also decided I wanted to read Sophocles in a couple of different translations, and in my novel, use choruses and settings from Oedipus at Colonus at the end, so that in that condensed, displaced way that dreams point to things that did come true. We're going to miss that cicada chorus this year, for Brood 10 won't come to Louisiana, and we won't be going to Virginia or anything. There'll be a few of the annuals around town, of course, and we'll listen to them in the evening when we sit on the front porch drinking wine, or maybe futzing with the garden, digging in the soft soil with our fingers and feeling the song wrap around us like a band. Thanks.
Well, we don't have cicadas down here, but we do have termites, and those are almost as good.
Yeah, well, they're silent though. But we do have cicadas, just not very many.
Sure.
You hear them one at a time.
Thanks, Bill. That was a lot of fun. All right, next up, we're going to hear from Susan Dickey, the translator, and I believe she's written something of her own. Is that right, Susan? Let's see, I had asked to unmute Susan. Are you there? Susan?
Oh, hi, Jonathan. Thank you for inviting me to read a poem. I'm so happy, and I'm going to continue writing. I'm a bit of a closet poet at the moment. I'm going to read a villanelle tonight. It's my first villanelle. The poem is based on a story in my beloved Ralph's, there you go, memoir, and it is memoirs. It's about, which are about 150 pages of single spaced, and what a life, an extraordinary life. It's an extraordinary read. Anyway, this is one of his stories, and I'll start reading the poem here now. Okay, let's see. Classic margaritas. Last night, my daughter Allie made me a classic margarita, and I remember drifting down south from San Diego at Husong's Cantina, where we sipped our salty margaritas. I drove the green sedan old 60 miles south of Tijuana and arrived in Ensenada, that dusty coastal town in Baja, Mexico. I got myself a cheap room right next to Husong's Cantina. At Husong's Cantina, a man asked me to meet a lovely señorita. Her family wanted us to marry. What a sweet scenario. At Husong's Cantina, we sipped our salty margaritas. 65 years later, I still recall flying with Basilio Tapia. We dropped confetti over a line of convertibles with pageant girls. Que mondo. I got myself a cheap room right next to Husong's Cantina. Ah, those rowdy-dowdy days and nights in the town of Ensenada. Now tourists trample daisies, cruise ships spoil the bays hollow. At Husong's Cantina, we sipped our salty margaritas. In '56, I drove that green sedan old 60 miles south of Tijuana and arrived in Ensenada, that dusty coastal town in Baja, Mexico. I got myself a cheap room right next to Husong's Cantina. At Husong's Cantina, we sipped our classic margaritas. For any of you who don't know, the margarita was invented in Husong's Cantina in Ensenada. I think in the, when was it, the 40s or 50s? Anyway, that's my contribution tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Welcome.
All right, that was excellent. Okay, now we're going to hear from Allison Miller. Let's see. Allison, where are you calling in from?
Hello, I'm from Australia, Victoria, Geelong, just out of lockdown near Cassandra.
All right.
Hey, Just because you're not in lockdown and I am and we're in the same state, you don't have to rub it in.
Look, that's the difference of 60 kilometers. What can I say? Thank you so much for having me. It's really lovely to be here with so many incredible and incredibly esteemed poets here. And as timing would have it, our neighbours have just started running their circular saw. So hopefully the sound is okay. And in the spirit of lockdown, I'm reading a poem called Tight Locked.
What's that?
The windows were tight locked, aluminium frames shut against winter and puberty, and a northerly that banged against the surface like Kathy returning from the moors. Mould tracked the glass like veins, stuck close to corners and fed by closed breath and blocked light and the steady thrum of ducted heating. A hermetic space, nothing out, nothing that might crawl inside the dark places of memory and sleep. We unwound those screws, broke open the circulation of a room sealed by a father's fear of a daughter who would not speak, of a story of a next door man who looked upon children with too much love. The still grooves were earth jammed and corpse filled, slaters and silver moths and fat black flies whose maggots had long departed, their bodies leached dry. Oviviparous, you say, larvae hatching inside the mother, a nightmare of birth and devourment. We scrubbed the metal over and over, fingers bone sodden with bleach and hot water. Under the ledge, initials are gouged into the white painted wood in a language we cannot read. The deep strikes like trapped witnesses, a haunted voice from a dream. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. That was very vivid. All right. And yeah, Cindy says, excellent earrings. Very cool. I think we have time for one more person. We have Ralph Culver, who is here under a different name. So let me find him. There we go. Okay, this is Ralph Culver posing as Hillary Appelman. Ralph, are you on?
I am. Thank you, Jonathan. Can everyone hear me?
We can.
All right, good. It's such an honor and a treat to be a part of the reading this evening. And thank you, Jonathan and Cassandra and Mark. The poem I'd like to read for this evening is called For the Last Catamount. And just in case there is anyone in the room for whom that word isn't familiar, catamount is just another term for mountain lion or cougar. And as a Vermonter, I'm speaking specifically about the eastern mountain lion. A mountain lion in Vermont hasn't been taken by hunters since the end of the 19th century. But they were only declared officially extinct, I think in 2018, just a few years ago. But sightings of catamounts in Vermont and in New England still pop up. I mean, it's an animal that is very much a part of the New England mythos, and we seem to keep seeing it. We don't seem to want to let go of it. For the Last Catamount. The round descending eye of fire narrows down the Gunsight Valley. A hawk hangs perfectly still, then sheers toward the river. Day heavy, lazing on a warming rock, the gold head of teeth and thick-lidded opals shifts, yawning under the sun's attentions. Her paws go soft now. She dozes. Skirling black flies and the quick water's reassuring purl meld to a rustle of parting growth. She recognizes what can only be summoned in dreams, his likeness driven from and nearing her. He stands in wait by the trees. Night and hunger, one being, will fall soon enough, patiently hunting the mouth of the river to follow the valley upstream. She wakens without expectation. Water, kill, sleep, the passing light, the labors of a daily birth in a world of endings. Thank you.
Wow, another beautifully vivid poem. Thank you, Ralph. All right, I believe that's our program for tonight. Let's see, Mark's already made announcements, but Mark, Cassandra, is there anything you'd like to say?
Yes, absolutely. Just once again, let you know that we have Gary Snyder's award ceremony coming up. That's at 10 p.m. Eastern time. I put the link in the chat feed. I will do it again before we depart. So if you've time, if you'd like to see that, please come along. In the meantime, we have, as I said, coming up an amazing show with Molly Gaudry, Diane K. Martin, Helen Ivory, and Fred Marchand on June 19. And in leaving you, once again, I'd like to say so many thanks to John Kinsella, Tracy Ryan, Allison Adelle Hedge Coke, Wang Ping, and Gary Snyder for this wonderful day celebrating the black bear in America. So I'm just going to read a very short poem just to end. It's called This Afternoon's Year. Billionth of a second, flurry of non-dimension, tachyon time becoming curved, sludge becoming waved, skin becoming flatline, crackle of twin molecule chains clenching layer upon layer, grasping, slipping into one another, destined to become something other. Thank you, everybody, for this wonderful show. See you next time.
Good night, everybody.
Good
Good
night.
night. Love to the black bear. Mwah.
Absolutely.